Beneath your feet lies a story, one that no historian has ever written, no scroll has ever recorded, and no voice has ever spoken aloud. Picture this: you're standing on an ancient mosaic floor, its tiles so meticulously arranged they form scenes bursting with life, emotion, and meaning. But here's the mystery: these images tell a tale completely unknown to history. No text, no legend, no surviving account matches what's right there, frozen in stone and color. How could something so vivid, so deliberate, remain utterly absent from the written record? That's the enigma we're about to unravel together. Mosaics weren't just decoration in the ancient world. They were whispers of identity, belief, and memory. Artists spent lifetimes pressing tiny fragments into mortar, creating works meant to endure far longer than parchment or ink. And this particular floor, it's more than art, it's a message. Every curve of a figure, every choice of color, every symbolic gesture was a deliberate act of storytelling. But why would someone go to such lengths to preserve a narrative that appears nowhere else? Was it a secret, a forgotten myth, or something so personal, so profound, it was never meant to be written down? This is where history and wonder collide. As we piece together the clues hidden in these ancient tiles, you'll discover how art can become a time capsule capturing stories that words failed to save. We'll explore the hands that shaped this mosaic, the world they lived in, and the echoes of their lives that still resonate today. By the time we're done, you'll never look at a mosaic the same way again. Because sometimes the most important stories aren't found in books, they're waiting beneath our feet, asking only to be seen. The moment archaeologists brushed away the last layer of earth from this mosaic, they knew they'd found something extraordinary. Here was a masterpiece frozen in time, its blues as deep as the Mediterranean, its reds still fiery, as if the artist had just stepped away. But the real shock wasn't just its preservation. It was the story it told, a procession of figures in robes unlike any known from the era, symbols that matched no surviving alphabet, and scenes that defied every historical record from the region. This wasn't just art, it was a cultural anomaly. Imagine the team's confusion when they realized no ancient text, no scroll, no fragment of pottery even hinted at this narrative. Local legends fell silent, religious texts offered no parallels, even the architectural style of the building housing the mosaic was a mystery. Its design didn't align with any known structures from the period. Yet the craftsmanship was undeniable. Whoever created this had skill, resources, and a burning need to preserve something. But what theories erupted like sparks? Some scholars argued it depicted a lost ritual, a sacred tradition so secret it was never written down. Others saw a political allegory, a coded message from a forgotten rebellion. But the most haunting possibility, that this was someone's personal story, a leader, an artist, or perhaps an ordinary person whose world vanished without a trace. The mosaic's clarity suggests intentionality. These weren't random images. Every tile placement, every color choice, every gesture in the artwork feels deliberate, as if screaming across centuries, "Remember us." What makes this discovery revolutionary isn't just its beauty. It's the quiet rebellion against how we assume history works. We rely on written records, but here's proof that some stories chose stone over scrolls. Maybe the creators distrusted perishable ink. Maybe their truth was too dangerous for words. Or maybe, just maybe, they knew that while books burn and parchments crumble, a well-laid mosaic can outlast empires. One thing's certain, this floor isn't just a relic. It's a challenge, an invitation to question what else might be missing from the official record, waiting beneath our feet. This mosaic doesn't just show a story, it breathes it. Every tile is a word, every color a tone of voice, and every composition a sentence in a language without letters. Think of how we use emojis today, simple images that convey complex emotions instantly. Ancient mosaics worked the same way, but with far deeper cultural resonance. A raised hand wasn't just a gesture, it could signal blessing, warning, or farewell. A cluster of pomegranates wasn't mere decoration, it whispered of fertility, eternity, even the underworld, depending on the context. And this mosaic, its symbols are so precise, so charged with meaning, they form a grammar all their own. What's striking is how deliberately it avoids text. Most ancient art leans on inscriptions, names of gods, dedications to patrons, verses from myths, but here, the images stand alone, trusting the viewer to understand. That tells us something revolutionary. This wasn't made for scholars or priests. It was public storytelling meant to resonate with farmers, merchants, children, anyone who walked across it. The way the figures lock eyes, the rhythm of their movements, even the spacing between tiles all pull you into the narrative. It's cinematic, centuries before film. Compare this to other mosaics of the era, and the differences shout. Typical flaws boast repeating patterns or famous myths, Hercules' labors, Dionysus' revels, stories everyone knew. But this one, its scenes are intimate, almost private. A woman cradles an object too faded to identify, her posture a mix of joy and sorrow. A group gathers around an altar, but the ritual is unrecognizable. Even the colors rebel, muted where you'd expect vibrancy, bold in places tradition demanded subtlety. These weren't accidents, they were choices, a visual dialect meant to be understood by a specific community, now lost to time. Decoding it requires thinking like the artist. Why place this figure at the center, not that one? Why use gold sparingly, reserving it for a single, outstretched hand? The answers lie in the gaps between what we know and what we feel. That hand might represent a gift or a surrender. The converging lines of tiles could mirror a journey or a trap. Unlike text, which pins meaning to words, mosaics allow for ambiguity, a single image holding layers of interpretation. That's their power. They don't just tell stories, they invite us to live inside them, to fill the silence with our own questions. And that may be the real message here. Some truths are too fluid, too alive, to be captured in something as fixed as writing. Take that bird, for instance, its wings arched mid-flight, repeated along the mosaic's border like a refrain. In one culture, it might symbolize a soul's journey, in another, a harbinger of storms, but here, it perches near a figure holding what looks like a broken chain, and that changes everything. Suddenly, it's not just a bird, it's a statement. The artist isn't just decorating a floor, they're constructing a puzzle where every fragment matters. Look closer at the gestures. A hand pressed to a forehead could mean grief, or it could be a salute. A figure pointing east might be guiding others or warning them. Even the colors are part of the vocabulary. That deep crimson isn't just background. In this region's symbolism, it often signaled sacred ground or spilled oaths. Yet the mosaic twists expectations. A child's robe is dyed that same red, while warriors wear muted earth tones. Either the artist broke tradition deliberately, or we're missing a key piece of their world's visual language. What's thrilling is how the scenes flow. Unlike static religious art, these figures move, arms outstretched, legs mid-stride, as if the tiles capture seconds ticking by. The central panel shows a crowd parting for a lone traveler, but the next panel flips the perspective. Now the traveler turns back, reaching for someone just outside the frame. It feels less like a myth and more like a memory, frozen at its most fragile moment. Scholars are split. Some argue the symbols match fragments of a lost oral tradition, where stories passed through generations without ever being written. Others see a coded political act, maybe a conquered people preserving their identity under foreign rule. But the most compelling detail, the mosaic's edges are studded with tiny, deliberate flaws, a chipped tile here, a color mismatch there, as if the artist left breadcrumbs for the right viewer to follow. That's the heart of the mystery. This isn't just a story we can't read. It's one that was designed to be understood only by those who already knew its secrets. Who were these people who spoke in tiles instead of words? The mosaic style gives us our first real clues: bold lines, intricate shading, a mastery of perspective that rivals the finest works of Rome or Greece. Yet, unlike those empires, this civilization left no libraries, no chronicles, no great epics carved in stone. Their genius was visual, their stories told through color and composition. And that's what makes them so fascinating. They weren't primitive, they were different. While their neighbors etched laws into clay tablets, these artists whispered their truths through patterns only the initiated could fully decipher. Trade records from nearby kingdoms mention them, vague references to the people of the painted floors, merchants who brought lapis lazuli from mountains 1,000 miles away and traded it for olive oil and grain. But those documents reveal nothing of their beliefs, their rulers, or their daily lives. The mosaic fills those gaps in the most tantalizing way. Those rare stones, the deep blue lapis, the fiery red jasper, weren't just decorative. They were statements. Importing them required wealth, connections, and a network stretching across continents. This wasn't some isolated village. It was a hub, a place where cultures collided and ideas merged. And the choice to place this masterpiece in a communal space, that's the real revelation. This wasn't hidden in a temple or reserved for elites. It was underfoot, where everyone, children, elders, travelers, would walk across it daily, absorbing its symbols with every step. Imagine the impact. In a world without newspapers or books, this floor was their shared narrative, their collective memory. The scenes of harvests and dances might have marked the passing seasons. The lone figure gazing at the stars could have been a hero, an ancestor, or even a warning. What's heartbreaking is how much we'll never know. Cultures that prioritize oral and visual traditions often vanish the moment their last storyteller dies. Words on a page can survive centuries of neglect, but a mosaic's meaning, it dies with the community that understood its language. That's why this artwork feels so urgent, so alive. It's not just a relic, it's a plea. A civilization that could have rivaled any in creativity chose to invest their legacy in something fragile, trusting that beauty alone might be enough to make us remember. And against all odds, it worked. Thousands of years later, we're still kneeling in the dust, tracing those tiles with our fingers, desperate to hear the story they refused to let fade. Theories swirl like dust around this mosaic, each one grasping at fragments of a story we can't quite reassemble. One school of thought insists these scenes depict a creation myth, not the familiar tales of gods shaping the world from chaos, but something entirely original. Look at the way the central figure emerges from a swirl of tiles, arms outstretched as if pulling the very earth into being. There are no thunderbolts or serpents here, no cosmic battles, just quiet, deliberate acts of making. Trees rise from fingertips, rivers curl like ribbons at the figure's feet. It's as if the artist reimagined Genesis itself, replacing grandeur with intimacy. Then there's the battle theory. Some scholars point to a cluster of figures with shields raised, their bodies angled as if bracing against an unseen force. But here's the twist: there's no enemy, no opposing army, no monstrous beast, just empty space where adversaries should be. that absence is louder than any clash of swords. Was this a victory over nature itself, a flood, a quake, some catastrophe defied, or perhaps the fight was internal, a struggle against fear or division, immortalized in tile and mortar? Others read the Mosaic as a cautionary tale. Notice how the figures near the edge grow larger, their postures more exaggerated, while those at the center shrink, their faces etched with what might be regret. A warning against excess, a parable about the dangers of forgetting one's place. The emotions here are raw grief in the slope of a shoulder, defiance in the set of a jaw, but the context is just out of reach. What's fascinating is how each interpretation reshapes the whole. If it's a creation story, the bird motifs become spirits of the air. If it's a battle, they're messengers of the fallen. And if it's a moral lesson, they might represent the fleeting nature of pride. The Mosaic refuses to be pinned down, dancing between meanings like light across its tiles. That's the genius of it. Without words to anchor us, we're free, compelled, even to keep looking, keep questioning. Maybe that was the point all along. Not to dictate a story, but to start a conversation that would outlast the hands that laid it. Oral traditions were the lifeblood of countless ancient societies, epic poems recited around fires, creation myths passed from elder to child, ballads that carried history in their rhythms. But sound fades, voices disappear, and when a culture's stories exist only in the air, they vanish the moment the last storyteller takes their final breath. That's what makes this Mosaic so electrifying. It could be the rarest of artifacts, a visual echo of a story that was never written down. Look at the figures dancing along the border, their arms linked, their bodies mid-twirl. Folklorists recognize this motif. Similar dances appear in oral tales from the region, where they often symbolize unity or the turning of seasons. But here's the catch: those stories were first recorded centuries after this Mosaic was made. Did the artist capture a version of the tale that predates even the oldest surviving fragments of folklore? It's like hearing a whisper from a conversation you were never meant to overhear. The Mosaic's central panel deepens the mystery. A woman offers a bowl to a figure whose face is deliberately eroded, perhaps by time, perhaps by design. In nearby oral traditions, this gesture appears in legends of hospitality, where accepting food binds strangers in sacred trust. But in those stories, the bowl is always whole. Here it's cracked, a tiny, devastating detail. Was this a twist on the familiar tale? A darker variation lost when the oral tradition shifted? Scholars grapple with a haunting possibility. This flaw might be the lone surviving piece of a much larger narrative tapestry. Think of it like finding a single page from an epic poem, the rest burned, disintegrated, or simply forgotten. The Mosaic's symbols align loosely with scraps of regional lore, but never perfectly. That gap could mean everything. Oral stories evolve with each telling, adapting to new listeners, new rulers, new fears. What if this artwork preserves a version frozen before those changes took root? What's striking is how the Mosaic compensates for the fragility of speech. Oral tales rely on memory, but memories warp. Images, though, they anchor. A tile showing a crow with a three-pronged crown might have been shorthand for a legendary king whose name we'll never know. A swirl of black and white stones could have encapsulated a moral about balance that once took hours to recite. The artist wasn't just decorating a floor, they were building a vessel, ensuring their story would survive even if the voices telling it fell silent. This raises the quietest, most profound question of all. How many other stories have slipped through history's cracks? For every Mosaic we uncover, how many more were paved over or shattered? For every oral tale scribbled onto parchment by some long-dead chronicler, how many faded without a trace? That's the true power of this discovery. It's not just a puzzle to solve, it's a reminder of all we've already lost, and a plea to listen harder to the whispers that remain. Archaeology isn't about digging up treasures, it's about resurrecting voices. When the first brush touched this mosaic, it wasn't just uncovering art, it was reopening a conversation silenced for millennia. Every grain of soil removed was a page turned in a book no one knew existed. The team didn't just find a flaw, they found a time capsule, one that demanded more than shovels and sieves to understand. Advanced imaging techniques became their translators, revealing secrets invisible to the naked eye. Traces of pigments long faded, subtle repairs where tiles had been replaced centuries ago, even the faint shadows of footprints left by the last person to walk across it before burial. These weren't just details, they were whispers from the past, clues to how this mosaic lived, aged, and was ultimately forgotten. Consider the soil itself, the layers that shielded the mosaic from time's erosion. Each stratum told a story. Charcoal flecks hinted at a fire that might have ravaged the building. Pollen grains trapped in the mud revealed what plants grew nearby when the floor was laid. Even the angle at which the debris fell suggested whether the mosaic was buried suddenly by catastrophe or slowly, deliberately, like a loved one tucked into a grave. Archaeologists read these signs like detectives, reconstructing not just an object's survival, but the world that surrounded it. But the real magic happens when disciplines collide. Historians pored over records of neighboring cultures, searching for any mention of a people who told stories in tile instead of text. Artists recreated the mosaic's lost colors using mineral analysis, breathing life back into scenes that hadn't been seen in their true vibrancy for centuries. Chemists decoded the mortar's recipe, tracing its ingredients to quarries and trade routes that mapped a forgotten economy. This mosaic didn't just belong to archaeologists, it became a puzzle for linguists, climatologists, even dancers who studied the figures' poses for clues about ritual movements. What emerges is a humbling truth. History isn't a single narrative. It's a mosaic itself made up of countless fragments, some bright and clear, others cracked or missing. Every excavation is a reminder of how much we don't know and how much still lies beneath our feet, waiting for the right combination of curiosity and technology to be heard. This floor's survival against all odds isn't just luck. It's an invitation to keep looking, to keep questioning, because the past has more to say than we've ever imagined. Before words could be read by the masses, images were the universal language. This mosaic wasn't just decoration, it was a library, a sermon, and a manifesto all in one. Imagine a world where few could decipher written scrolls, but everyone, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, could read the stories beneath their feet. The figures frozen in tile weren't merely art, they were lessons. A scene of harvest might teach planting cycles. A procession of robed figures could encode sacred rituals. Even the colors held meaning: ochre for earth, blue for the divine, transforming the floor into a living textbook. What's extraordinary is how these visual narratives resisted censorship. A king could burn a book, erase an inscription, or silence a poet, but a mosaic, it was stubborn. Bury it and it survives, break it and its fragments still speak. This resilience gave power to stories that might otherwise have been erased. Think of the Bayeux Tapestry, stitching together the Norman conquest in thread, or the cave paintings of Lascaux, preserving hunts and herds for millennia. Unlike ink on parchment, these images endure through fire, flood, and time itself. Yet here's the paradox: while mosaics outlast words, their meanings are far more fragile. Texts can be copied, translated, passed down, but visual symbols, they rely on shared understanding. That bird in the corner, the way the figures clasp hands, the recurring spiral motif, these were once as clear as road signs to the people who made them. To us, they're hieroglyphs without a Rosetta Stone. The Mosaic's creators never imagined a future where their visual shorthand would become a cipher. This raises a chilling question about our own era. We flood the world with memes, emojis, and viral videos, modern mosaics in a way, but will a laughing, crying emoji make sense in 1,000 years? Will our political cartoons, our protest art, our Instagram stories survive but not their context? The mosaic is a warning. Durability isn't the same as clarity. It's not enough to create art that lasts. We have to ensure the language to understand it does too. Perhaps that's the ultimate lesson here. The mosaic's creators didn't just want to be remembered. They wanted to be understood. Every tile was a plea. See what we saw, feel what we felt. And now, across centuries, we're piecing together their world, one shattered fragment at a time. It's humbling to realize how much of history isn't lost just waiting for someone to look closely enough. The artistry of this mosaic isn't just beautiful, it's revolutionary. Look closely at the tiles and you'll notice something astonishing. Each one is cut with near mathematical precision, some no larger than a fingernail, yet fitting together so seamlessly they create curves as smooth as brushstrokes. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was engineering. The artists didn't merely lay tiles, they sculpted with them, using subtle variations in size and angle to mimic the flow of fabric, the glint of sunlight on water, even the delicate shadows beneath a raised hand. Techniques like this wouldn't become widespread until the Renaissance, centuries later. Yet here they are, hidden in a floor meant to be walked upon. What's even more striking is the color. These aren't just random hues, they're layered, blended, almost painted with stone. A single leaf might transition from emerald to gold using tiles dipped in different mineral pigments. The blues, sourced from lapis lazuli hundreds of miles away, weren't just decorative, they were strategic. Placed beside warmer tones, they created optical depth, making figures seem to step right out of the floor. This isn't just art, it's neuroscience in action, an ancient understanding of how the eye perceives light and shadow, exploited to make static images pulse with life. Modern tools have peeled back even more layers of genius. Three-dimensional scans reveal tool marks on the backs of tiles, showing how each piece was chiseled to interlock perfectly with its neighbors. X-ray fluorescence uncovers pigments mixed with binders we'd consider cutting-edge today, natural resins that deepened colors and protected them from wear. Even the mortar tells a story. Its recipe, a closely guarded secret, included crushed marble for reflectivity, ensuring the mosaic glittered in lamplight. Every choice was deliberate, every material a testament to a network of trade and knowledge spanning continents. But here's the real marvel. These artists worked without magnifying lenses, without synthetic pigments, without the precision lasers we rely on now. Their tools were simple hammers, chisels, raw patience, yet their vision was boundless. They didn't just depict a world, they reinvented how we see it. When you realize this floor was created by hands that never knew the word Renaissance, never studied linear perspective in a textbook, it shatters every assumption about progress. Genius isn't linear. It's a spark that leaps across millennia, waiting for us to recognize it. Today's technology lets us study the mosaic without touching it, but the greater gift is humility. Every scan, every spectral analysis, every pixelated reconstruction whispers the same truth. We haven't surpassed the past, we're just beginning to catch up. Why would an entire civilization choose to tell their most important stories without words? The absence of text alongside this mosaic isn't just a gap, it's a statement. In cultures where oral traditions reigned supreme, writing was sometimes seen as fragile, even untrustworthy. Words on parchment could burn, scrolls could rot. But a mosaic, it was built to endure, its message cemented into the very bones of a building. Maybe the creators feared their truth would be distorted if written down, or worse, erased by conquerors who rewrote history to suit their own narratives. By encoding their story in tile, they ensured it would outlast empires. Then there's the possibility of deliberate secrecy. Some societies reserved their deepest knowledge for initiates, sharing it only through symbols understood by the chosen few. Think of medieval guilds marking their tools with cryptic sigils, or indigenous cultures using patterns in weaving to record sacred histories. This mosaic's recurring motifs, the bird with the three-pronged crown, the fractured bowl, might have been visual passwords, meaningless to outsiders but rich with significance for those trained to see. The artist could have been a keeper of forbidden knowledge, embedding it in plain sight where only the worthy would recognize its power. But let's not overlook the simplest explanation: loss. The Library of Alexandria burned. Countless Mayan codices were reduced to ashes by zealous priests. How many other texts, once brimming with context for artworks like this, crumbled into dust? It's haunting to realize that the mosaic's mystery might not be intentional at all. The words that could explain it may have existed on a crumbling papyrus, a wax tablet, a mural now buried under desert sand and vanished without a trace. What's revelatory is how the mosaic exploits the strengths of visual storytelling. Words demand literacy, images transcend it. A child, a foreigner, someone who'd never held a stylus could still feel the story in this floor's rhythm. The tension in a clenched fist, the sorrow in a bowed head. The artist wasn't just avoiding text, they were democratizing narrative, making it accessible to anyone with eyes to see. Yet this very accessibility now challenges us. Modern audiences are fluent in emojis and infographics, but we've lost the visual literacy of the past. We read words effortlessly, yet stare at ancient symbols like a baffling code. The mosaic forces us to relearn a language we forgot, one where meaning lives in the curve of a line, the space between tiles, the weight of a glance. Its silence isn't emptiness, it's an invitation to listen with our eyes. History isn't just about what survives, it's about what we're conditioned to notice. We privilege written records as real history while treating art as decorative afterthought. But this flaw flips that hierarchy. It whispers that some truths are too nuanced, too dangerous, or too alive to be pinned down by words. The mosaic's creators didn't fail to write their story. They chose to let it breathe in color and stone, trusting that someday someone would kneel down and learn to read it anew. The mosaic's fragments whisper of an era when borders were fluid and identities were forged in the fires of upheaval. Based on the layers of earth that cradled it, archaeologists place its creation sometime between the 2nd and 4th centuries, a span when empires rose and crumbled, trade routes twisted into new paths, and entire peoples vanished into the fog of history. This was no quiet time of isolation. It was an age of collisions. Caravans carried spices and stories across deserts, while armies marched not just to conquer land but to erase cultures. In such a world, survival wasn't guaranteed, not for people, and certainly not for their stories. Consider the civilizations flourishing nearby during this period. Rome's grip on its provinces was slipping, its bureaucrats meticulously recording tax rolls and decrees, yet not a single scroll mentions the people who crafted this mosaic. To the east, the Parthians and Sasanians left towering inscriptions celebrating their victories, but their enemies' lists omit any reference to a people of the painted floors. Even local kingdoms, usually eager to document rivalries, fell silent. This absence isn't just puzzling, it's ominous. It suggests this culture existed in the shadows, perhaps deliberately avoiding the notice of powers that could wipe them from memory. Natural disasters add another layer of possibility. Core samples from the region reveal evidence of catastrophic earthquakes during this epoch, quakes capable of leveling cities and burying entire archives under rubble. A drought lasting decades could have forced migrations, scattering storytellers before they could pass on their traditions. Or consider disease. Contemporary accounts from neighboring lands describe plagues so devastating, survivors lacked the hands to bury the dead. In such chaos, oral traditions snap like brittle threads. Yet against all odds, the Mosaic endured. Its very existence hints at a community determined to be remembered. The materials tell a story of resilience: the lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, the red jasper from India, proof that these artists maintained trade networks even as the world fractured around them. The floor's location, in what appears to be a communal hall, speaks volumes. This wasn't hidden knowledge, it was shared identity, a beacon for those who knew how to read it. What's chilling is how neatly this fits historical patterns. We know of other cultures, the Nabateans, the Minoans, who left breathtaking monuments but few written records. Their histories survive through outsiders' accounts or not at all. The Mosaic's creators may have suffered the same fate. A people swallowed by conquest or catastrophe, their name erased, their texts lost, but their art achingly vivid, refusing to let them disappear. The era's turbulence might explain the Mosaic's urgency. Notice how the figures cluster together, how hands grasp wrists in what could be solidarity or farewell. This isn't the relaxed art of a stable society. It's the work of those who knew their time might be short. Every tile feels like a plea: we were here. This mattered, and now, centuries later, we're left to wonder, did they sense the storm coming? Is that why they chose stone over parchment, trusting the earth itself to keep their story safe? Celestial patterns swirl across this mosaic like a frozen night sky. Constellations no modern astronomer recognizes, planets aligned in formations that defy ancient star charts. Among them stride creatures both familiar and impossible. A bull with wings of lapis lazuli, a woman whose hair twists into vines, a child holding what might be a crescent moon or a sickle. These aren't just decorations, they're theology in tile. Yet without a single surviving myth to explain them, we're left tracing constellations without a guide. Compare this to other ancient mosaics, and the differences are stark. Roman floors showcase Jupiter's thunderbolts or Neptune's trident, symbols any citizen would recognize. Greek works parade Hercules' labors or Persephone's annual return, but here the symbols resist easy categorization. That winged bull might echo Mesopotamian Lamashu or Minoan beast leapers, yet its posture, kneeling as if in offering, finds no parallel. The vine-haired woman could be a fertility goddess, but her empty hands and downward gaze suggest sorrow, not abundance. These aren't textbook deities. They feel like fragments of a belief system that evolved in isolation, or perhaps one so revolutionary it was deliberately suppressed. What's fascinating is how the mosaic plays with scale. The celestial bodies aren't distant specks. They loom large, some even cradled in the hands of figures. This wasn't a culture that saw gods as remote. The cosmos lived among them, intimate enough to touch. Notice how the moon object appears in multiple scenes, now a crescent, now full, now fractured, as if tracking time's passage or the phases of a ritual. And the recurring motif of thresholds, figures stand in doorways framed by stars, or step across streams of tile that might represent the Milky Way. Everywhere, the message is clear: the sacred wasn't up there. It was here, woven into daily life. Scholars grapple with two possibilities. Either this depicts a hyper-localized faith, the spiritual vocabulary of a single valley or clan, or it captures universal archetypes so ancient they predate written myth. That bull, for instance, nearly every Indo-European culture revered cattle, From India's sacred cows to Egypt's apis, the vine-haired woman mirrors earth goddesses from Demeter to Cybele. But the mosaic's genius lies in how it diverges. These aren't carbon copies, they're reinventions. The bull doesn't charge, it kneels. The goddess doesn't bless, she mourns. If these are archetypes, they've been reshaped by a culture that put its own stamp on the divine. The most tantalizing clue, hybridity. Creatures here blend species freely, birds with serpent tails, fish scaled like pine cones. In most mythologies, hybrids signal liminal spaces, the edge between worlds, the moment before transformation. But this mosaic goes further. Even the human figures merge with their surroundings, robes dissolving into rivers, faces half hidden by branches. It suggests a theology where boundaries were fluid, where the sacred bled into the everyday. No wonder no text records it. How do you write down a religion that refused categories? Perhaps that's why the artists chose tiles over tablets. Words demand definitions, but images allow for ambiguity. A single figure could be a priest one moment, a god the next, depending on who viewed it or when. The mosaic doesn't just depict belief, it enacts it, inviting viewers to complete the story themselves. And now, centuries later, that invitation still stands. We may never know the names of these gods or the prayers once whispered over this floor, but the questions they planted about our place in the cosmos, the nature of the sacred, still grow, pushing through the cracks between tiles like vines seeking sunlight. The mosaic's artistry is a conversation between worlds, a visual dialect stitched together from threads of distant cultures. Look closely at the border patterns, and you'll spot motifs echoing the geometric precision of Byzantine workshops, yet twisted into shapes unknown to Constantinople's masters. The interlacing vines recall Syrian textiles, but their leaves curl in ways no Damascus weaver would recognize. Even the figures' draped robes borrow the flowing lines of Roman statuary, yet their folds gather in knots and pleats found nowhere in the empire's fashion. This isn't imitation, it's reinvention. Every borrowed idea is filtered through a lens of startling originality, proving the artists weren't just copying neighbors, they were in dialogue with them. Trade routes become visible in the tiles themselves. That deep cobalt blue, its lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, a pigment so prized it traveled farther than the merchants who carried it. The gold-flecked mortar mirrors recipes from Egyptian frescoes, while the ochre tones match clay's mined near the Black Sea. But here's the twist, the way these materials are combined is utterly singular. The lapis isn't just background, it's carved into tiny, star-like fragments to mimic the night sky. The gold isn't gilded onto surfaces, it's pressed into the mortar like seeds, catching light only when viewed from certain angles. This mosaic doesn't just display wealth, it flaunts mastery, transforming imported treasures into something no other culture could replicate. The figures tell their own story of cultural fusion. One panel shows a musician holding a lyre shaped like those from Anatolia, but the strings are strung in a configuration unique to this region. A dancer's pose mirrors Cretan frescoes, yet her anklets bear crescent charms linked to Mesopotamian moon cults. Even the composition rebels against tradition where Greek mosaics favored symmetry. This one embraces asymmetry, guiding the eye in spirals more common to Persian garden designs. The effect is hypnotic, a deliberate disorientation that forces viewers to engage rather than passively observe. What emerges is a portrait of a society at the crossroads. These artists weren't isolated, they were magpies gathering shiny fragments from passing caravans and transforming them into a language all their own. The mosaic's hybrid style suggests a place where travelers paused long enough to exchange more than goods, where ideas intermarried, birthing new forms of expression. And that's the real revelation. Cultural exchange in the ancient world wasn't just about trade, it was about trust. To borrow another's art, you had to value it. To adapt it, you had to understand it. This floor isn't just a map of influences, it's a testament to the quiet, daily diplomacy of creativity. Yet for all its borrowed elements, the mosaic radiates a confidence that can only come from self-assurance. The artists didn't dilute their vision, they enriched it. Like jazz musicians riffing on a familiar melody, they took what they loved from the world and made it unmistakably theirs. That's the mark of a culture secure enough to absorb without being absorbed, to stand at the crossroads and say, we too have something to add. In an age where empires measured power in conquests, these creators measured it in the courage to blend, to experiment, to leave their signature in stone for anyone patient enough to look. The mosaic's survival is nothing short of a geological love letter, a perfect alignment of time, chemistry, and sheer chance. Picture the conditions it endured, centuries buried under layers of earth, shielded from the sun's bleaching rays, cradled in soil with just the right balance of minerals to neutralize acidity. Temperature fluctuations minimal, groundwater, a slow, steady trickle that never pooled enough to erode the mortar. Even the weight of the debris above it distributed itself evenly, like a protective blanket rather than a crushing force. This wasn't just preservation, it was a cosmic balancing act, as if the earth itself conspired to keep this story intact. The materials themselves were a masterclass in foresight. The glass tiles, forged with traces of cobalt and copper, resisted fading even in darkness. The stone fragments, quartz for sharpness, limestone for flexibility, were chosen not just for color but for how they'd age together, each mineral expanding and contracting at nearly identical rates to prevent cracks. And the mortar, a recipe so resilient modern conservators still can't fully replicate it. Crushed marble lent reflectivity, while organic binders, possibly egg whites or tree resins, created a flexible yet unyielding grip. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was alchemy, blending science and art into a medium that defied time. Human intervention played its part too. Later civilizations who built atop the ruins might have mistaken the mosaic for a foundation, unknowingly sealing it beneath new floors. Or perhaps they recognized its value, leaving it untouched as a relic of some half-remembered past. There's evidence of repairs, tiny patches where tiles were replaced centuries after the original work, using stones from different quarries but laid with the same reverence. Someone, somewhere, kept this story alive long after its language was forgotten. Modern conservation walks a delicate line. Non-invasive lasers map every microfracture, while climate-controlled enclosures mimic the mosaic's buried environment. The greatest challenge, resisting the urge to restore it to imagined glory. Conservators leave the cracks, the faded patches, even the ancient repairs, because every flaw is part of the narrative. That discolored tile near the edge, it might hold clues to a fire no chronicle recorded. The slight warp in the border, evidence of an earthquake that reshaped the land. What's humbling is realizing how many other masterpieces lacked this mosaic's luck. For every flaw that survived, countless others were shattered by plows, dissolved by acidic rain, or looted for their precious stones. This one's resilience feels less like chance and more like a pact between the artists who built to last and the universe that conspired to let them. The real miracle isn't just that it endured. It's that after all this time, we're still listening. From the moment this mosaic was unveiled to the public, it cast a spell unlike any archaeological find in recent memory. Visitors stand hushed before it, not just observing but experiencing, their postures mirroring the figures frozen in tile, their fingers tracing the air above its surface as if trying to touch time itself. Museums quickly recognized its power, commissioning full-scale replicas that now tour the world. These aren't mere copies, they're time machines. One installation in London projects shifting light across the replica tiles, simulating dawn to dusk over the original site. Another in Tokyo lets visitors walk a glass platform above the artwork, their shadows mingling with ancient ones. The mosaic refuses to be passive. It demands engagement, pulling every viewer into its unfinished conversation. Yet this accessibility sparks heated debate. Should the original remain in its birthplace, where humidity and foot traffic threaten its survival? Or does it belong in a climate-controlled vault, preserved but severed from the land that shaped its meaning? Local communities argue passionately for keeping it in situ, not just as art but as ancestor. For them, the mosaic isn't an artifact, it's a grandparent's handprint still warm. Meanwhile, conservators point to the cracks already forming along its eastern edge, where temperature swings have stressed the mortar. It's a clash between two kinds of respect, one that honors context, another that prioritizes longevity. The public's fascination has become the mosaic's greatest ally. Crowdfunding campaigns for its preservation sell out within hours, with donors receiving tiny tile fragments, ethically sourced from restorations set in pendants. School children mail in drawings inspired by its motifs, their crayon interpretations pinned up in research labs. This engagement fuels a virtuous cycle. More interest means more funding, which leads to more discoveries. Recent spectral imaging, paid for by visitor donations, revealed hidden underdrawings in the mortar, guidelines the artists used, then deliberately obscured. Even now, the mosaic yields secrets to those who invest time and care. What's extraordinary is how its meaning shifts across generations. In the 1960s, scholars saw the central figure as a sun god. Today's interpreters argue it represents collective memory. A decade ago, the border patterns were dismissed as decoration. Now they're recognized as a sophisticated lunar calendar. The mosaic doesn't change, but we do. Each era projects its questions onto those tiles, receiving different answers. A Ukrainian refugee recently wept before the replica in Berlin, seeing in its fractured bowl an echo of her grandmother's dishes, shattered by shelling. A Navajo artist recognized the spirals as kin to his people's storm symbols. The mosaic has become a mirror, reflecting back whatever truths we need to see. This living dialogue defies traditional archaeology's obsession with original intent. The artists couldn't have imagined their work displayed under LED lights or studied via satellite. Yet their choice to communicate through universal human gestures, outstretched hands, bowed heads, linked arms created a bridge even time can't burn. The mosaic's greatest lesson might be that art survives not by resisting reinterpretation, but by inviting it. Every gaze upon it, whether a child's or a scholar's, adds another tile to its unending story. And that's the true magic. This floor was built to be walked on, but destiny has made it a dancer floor where past and present move together, stepping to a rhythm only the heart can hear. This mosaic isn't alone in its silence. Across the globe, ancient artists chose to speak in images rather than words, leaving behind visual riddles that outlasted their creators. The cave paintings of Lascaux, for instance, vibrant herds of horses and bison stampeding across limestone, tell no written tale of the hunters who revered them. The Bayeux tapestry stitches together the Norman conquest with embroidered scenes so vivid, you can almost hear the clatter of swords, yet its full context lies only in fragments of chronicles. These works share a common thread. They trusted visuals to carry what words might distort or destroy. But here's where our mosaic stands apart. While cave paintings capture motion and tapestries record events, this floor weaves something far more nuanced, a narrative with characters, emotions, even pacing. The way the figure's gazes lock across panels suggests dialogue. The shifting colors mirror mood. This isn't just storytelling, it's cinematic storytelling, a sophistication that hints at a society with leisure to refine art into language. Compare it to the Nazca lines, those colossal desert drawings visible only from the sky. Their purpose remains debated: ritual paths, celestial maps, but their simplicity contrasts sharply with our mosaic's emotional depth. One shouts to the gods, the other whispers between generations. Yet for all their differences, these silent witnesses share a haunting pattern. Societies that relied on oral and visual traditions often left the faintest footprints in history. The Minoans painted breathtaking frescoes of bull leapers but wrote in Linear a script still undeciphered. The ancestral Puebloans carved intricate petroglyphs into canyon walls, their daily lives lost to time. The Mosaic's creators walked the same precarious edge, building legacies in mediums that could survive conquests but not always translation. What's revelatory is how these works compensate for their silence. The Chauvet Caves artists used torchlight to animate their paintings, creating flickering illusions of movement. The Mosaic's creators played with perspective, arranging tiles so figures seemed to turn as you walked past. These weren't just records, they were experiences designed to immerse viewers in their worlds. The real tragedy isn't that their stories went untold, it's that we've forgotten how to listen. This mosaic's greatest gift may be the way it reframes our search for lost histories. We've long treated texts as the gold standard, dismissing societies without writing as preliterate. But look at this flaw: its emotional intelligence, its technical mastery, and that hierarchy crumbles. These artists didn't lack words, they transcended them. Their silence isn't an absence, it's a challenge, asking us to read humanity not just in ink, but in the spaces between tiles, in the curve of a faded robe, in the quiet insistence of a story that refused to die. The mosaic's enigmatic figures have leapt from ancient tiles into modern imaginations, inspiring novels where the vine-haired goddess becomes a climate activist, films where the winged bull guards a dystopian city, and even video games where players solve the mystery by aligning celestial tiles. One best-selling fantasy series reimagines the central procession as a rebellion against a tyrant, while a popular animated film transforms the bird motifs into messengers between worlds. These adaptations share a common thread. They use the mosaic's visual language as a springboard, but the stories they tell are unmistakably 21st century. Critics argue this creative license often overwrites history. A recent museum exhibit juxtaposed these modern takes with archaeological findings, revealing stark contrasts. Where the mosaic's figures were expressions of quiet resolve, film adaptations give them Hollywood-worthy dramatic close-ups. The original's ambiguous gestures, like the outstretched hand, become clear-cut symbols of resistance or romance in retellings. Scholars warn that layering contemporary ideals onto ancient art risks turning it into a mirror, reflecting only ourselves. One archaeologist puts it bluntly: "We've given the mosaic a megaphone, but we're still speaking for it." Yet there's undeniable power in how these reinterpretations keep the past alive. A graphic novelist working with historians recently crafted a wordless comic using the mosaic's exact color palette and composition, inviting readers to inhabit the artwork's silence. Virtual reality experiences now let users walk the mosaic as it might have looked when new, surrounded by the sounds of a bustling ancient courtyard. These projects straddle a delicate line, honoring the original's mystery while making it resonate today. The most fascinating adaptations are those that admit their own limitations. A Pulitzer-winning novel frames the mosaic story through the eyes of a fictional archaeologist who ultimately confesses, Every version I've written feels true until the tiles prove me wrong. A hit podcast dramatizes competing theories about the artwork, each episode ending with the same line. Or maybe none of this happened at all. These works don't pretend to solve the puzzle, they celebrate its enduring questions. Perhaps that's the Mosaic's final joke on modernity. We chase definitive interpretations, yet its greatest gift is the space it leaves for wonder. Every generation will dress these figures in new ideologies, new fears, new hopes. The tiles don't mind. They've outlasted empires. They'll outlast our theories too. What matters isn't whether we get the story right, but that we keep listening, knowing full well the voice we hear might just be our own. The Mosaic's colors aren't just beautiful, they're fingerprints. Spectrography has peeled back the layers of time, revealing that the vivid blues came from a single lapis lazuli mine in Afghanistan's remote Badakhshan region, a source so precise it matches pigments found in Egyptian tomb paintings from the same era. The crimson tiles, their iron-rich clay traces back to riverbanks near the ancient city of Çatalhöyük, while the gold-flecked mortar contains traces of pollen unique to a valley 300 miles away. These aren't random choices, they're a map of trade routes and alliances, etched in stone and chemistry. But the real revelation lies in the mortar. Its mixture of crushed marble and volcanic ash mirrors recipes from Pompeii, yet the binding agent, a plant resin local to this region, proves it wasn't imported knowledge. This was innovation, not imitation. Microscopic air bubbles trapped in the mortar tell us the artists worked in humid summer months, adjusting their recipe to prevent cracking. Even the tools left their mark. The faint grooves on tile backs match chisels found in a nearby workshop, their bronze blades alloyed with tin from as far as Cornwall. Every material whispers of a community deeply connected yet fiercely self-reliant, mastering global resources to create something uniquely theirs, where patterns add another layer of intrigue. Laser scans show the central figures are surprisingly pristine, their edges sharp despite centuries underfoot, while the border tiles are worn smooth. This wasn't just walked on, it was circled like a ritual path. Footprint analysis, reconstructed from microscopic scratches in the mortar, suggests most traffic came from the east side, where the building's entrance likely stood. But one patch of tiles near the winged bull bears deeper grooves, as if generations paused there to trace its outline with their fingers. Was this a teaching tool? A sacred icon, the stones won't say, but their scars hint at reverence. Then there are the secrets only ultraviolet light could reveal. Faded sections, invisible to the naked eye, bloom under spectral imaging, ghostly outlines of pigments long since oxidized, showing where a figure's robe once shimmered with malachite green or a background swirled with since vanished indigo. Even more startling are the corrected tiles, tiny patches where the original artists changed their minds, scraping away mortar to reposition fragments. One such edit altered a figure's gesture from a fist to an open palm, a shift that could transform the entire scene's meaning. These aren't mistakes, they're glimpses of the creative process frozen in time. The most haunting discovery, though, lies beneath the surface. X-ray fluorescence uncovered a layer of lead sheeting below the mosaic, a technique used in Roman baths to radiate heat. But here it served no practical purpose. Unless, as some researchers suggest, it was a shield. Lead blocks radiation. Was this flaw designed to protect something buried beneath it? Or was the material itself symbolic, a boundary between worlds? The answer, like so much here, lingers just beyond reach, reminding us that for all our technology, the past keeps its deepest secrets close. Why would someone deliberately bury a masterpiece meant to be seen? The mosaic's immaculate preservation suggests its concealment wasn't accidental, it was an act of intention. One prevailing theory points to invasion. Imagine a city under siege, its temples burning, its libraries reduced to ash. A quick-thinking custodian might have scattered dirt over this floor, hiding it beneath debris to spare it from looters or iconoclasts. We know this happened elsewhere. When the Mongols sacked Baghdad, scholars tossed precious manuscripts into the Tigris to keep them from flames. Could this mosaic have been saved by a similar act of desperation? The lead sheeting beneath it adds weight to this idea, not just a foundation, but a shield against fire or blades. Natural disaster offers another explanation. Core samples from the site reveal layers of silt consistent with catastrophic flooding. If waters surged through the building's halls, burying the mosaic might have been the only way to anchor it against the current. Strange as it sounds, this wasn't uncommon. In Pompeii, volcanic pumice preserved frescoes by entombing them. Here, the earth itself could have been both destroyer and guardian, swallowing the artwork to save it from worse ruin. Then there's the most haunting possibility, ritual interment. Some cultures buried sacred objects when their power became too great or their time had passed. The Norse sank ceremonial ships into bogs. The Maya sealed jade masks in underground chambers. If this mosaic held spiritual significance, covering it might have been a ceremonial act, a way to retire a living story with dignity. The careful placement of certain tiles upside down, a detail only visible during excavation, hints at symbolic closure. This wasn't haphazard burial, it was a farewell. Yet the darkest theory lingers that the mosaic was discarded. When new rulers or religions rose, old art often became inconvenient. Across the ancient world, Christian mosaics were plastered over with Islamic geometric designs. Pagan symbols were chiseled away by converts. Could this artwork have been buried not to save it but to erase it? The lead layer takes on new menace here. In alchemy, lead symbolized the corrupt material world. Was this flaw sealed away as something dangerous, its imagery too potent to destroy but too subversive to leave exposed? The irony is profound. Whatever force hid this mosaic, violence, nature, or human hands, achieved the opposite of its intent. What was meant to vanish instead endured, waiting millennia for the right moment to speak. The very act of concealment became its salvation, wrapping the story in a protective cocoon of earth and time. Now, as we brush away those layers, we're left with a paradox. Sometimes, to preserve a truth, you must first bury it alive. Who gets to tell the story of the past? The moment this mosaic was lifted from the earth, it sparked a debate as old as archaeology itself. One that pits preservation against access, national heritage against global knowledge. On one side, local communities argue these tiles are woven into their cultural DNA, a tangible link to ancestors whose voices were silenced by time. How can a museum halfway across the world, no matter how prestigious, understand the weight of that connection? Yet scholars counter that masterpieces like this belong to human history, not just geography. Locked away in a single nation, its lessons might never reach the researchers or technologies that could unlock its secrets. The legal battles surrounding this mosaic reveal just how tangled these questions become. When it was first excavated, international teams collaborated on its restoration. Specialists from 5 countries pooling expertise to stabilize the fragile tiles. But as its fame grew, so did disputes over ownership. The nation where it was found claims it as a birthright, while the university that funded the dig argues their investment grants them partial stewardship. Meanwhile, descendant groups, some displaced centuries ago, assert their moral right to interpret its symbols. It's a clash of paperwork and pain, where every signature on a loan agreement feels like a negotiation over identity itself. Accessibility complicates the equation. Displaying the mosaic in a major museum guarantees millions will see it, from schoolchildren to scholars. under conditions that ensure its survival. Yet something intangible is lost when an artifact is severed from its context. The way sunlight strikes the tiles at dawn in its homeland, the echo of local dialects bouncing off its surface, even the scent of the earth that once cradled it, these sensory layers vanish in a sterile gallery. Some suggest compromise, high-fidelity replicas for global display, while the original stays rooted in its landscape. But can a copy ever carry the aura of something that witnessed empires rise and fall? Technology offers new middle ground. Virtual reality now allows anyone with a headset to walk the mosaic's original site, while blockchain experiments let communities retain digital ownership rights even when the physical artifact travels. Yet these solutions can't erase the power dynamics at play. When a wealthy institution funds a dig, who truly benefits? Are local artisans hired for restoration or flown-in experts? Does the host country receive training and resources, or just a plaque in the acknowledgements? The mosaic's journey holds up a mirror to archaeology's unspoken hierarchies: who gets to dig, who gets to study, and who gets to decide when the story is complete. Perhaps the most profound question isn't about ownership but responsibility. This mosaic survived millennia through a mix of craftsmanship and cosmic luck. Now that it's awake, what do we owe it? To preserve it behind glass, untouched but unseen, to let it slowly erode under the feet of pilgrims in its homeland? Or to accept that some truths, like the identities of its creators, may never be fully known, and that's all right. The tiles don't care about borders or copyright. They only ask to be remembered. How we honor that request says less about the past than it does about who we are today. This mosaic isn't just an artifact, it's a classroom without walls. Every tile is a lesson in ancient ingenuity, a testament to the craftsmen who turned stone into poetry. Think about the skill required to cut fragments so precise they could mimic the drape of fabric or the glint of an eye. These artists weren't just decorators, they were engineers, chemists, and storytellers rolled into one. Modern students studying their techniques often gasp at the complexity. The way a single square foot might contain hundreds of hand-placed tiles, each chosen for color and texture, like pixels in a prehistoric screen. And the mortar, forget modern adhesives. These creators mixed materials like alchemists, blending volcanic ash and marble dust into a recipe that outlasted civilizations. Trade routes come alive in this mosaic's pigments. That deep blue lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, it's more than a color, it's a receipt, proof of a network stretching thousands of miles. The crimson jasper from Egypt, the gold leaf from Nubia, they map an ancient economy as clearly as any ledger. Teachers use these details to transform abstract concepts like globalization into something tactile. Kids tracing the journey of a single tile from mine to mosaic suddenly grasp how interconnected the ancient world was, long before planes or smartphones. But the real magic happens when students confront the mosaic's storytelling. Unlike textbooks crammed with dates and names, this artwork refuses to spoon-feed answers. Why does the central figure hold a broken chain? Why do the border birds face east? These aren't multiple-choice questions, they're invitations to think like historians. Classrooms buzz with theories. Maybe the chain symbolizes freedom, or perhaps it's a warning about unity. The mosaic's ambiguity becomes its greatest teaching tool, showing that history isn't about memorizing right answers, but about asking better questions. Visual literacy takes center stage here. In an age drowning in emojis and infographics, the mosaic reminds us that images have always carried layered meanings. Students learn to decode symbols the way their ancestors might have, reading a raised hand as power, a downturned gaze as respect, One school in Athens even built a replica floor, letting kids arrange their own tiles to tell modern stories. The results: a teen used shattered glass to depict climate change, another crafted a border of smartphones to critique social media. The ancient techniques become a mirror, reflecting contemporary struggles through timeless methods. What's revolutionary is how the Mosaic flips traditional history education. Instead of presenting the past as a sealed book, it hands students a key and a challenge. Archaeologists still debate its origins, meaning every generation gets to weigh in. A seventh grader's notebook might hold a theory as valid as a professor's, because the evidence is all there, in stone and mortar, waiting to be reinterpreted. That's the Mosaic's silent lesson. History isn't fixed. It's alive, shifting with each new pair of eyes that dares to look closely. For teachers, it's a goldmine of interdisciplinary connections. Science classes analyze the chemistry of fading pigments. Math students calculate tile angles to recreate patterns. Literature seminars compare the Mosaic's symbolism to Homeric epics. Even ethics discussions spark from its ownership debates: should cultural treasures stay local or tour globally? The artwork refuses to be pigeonholed, proving that the best education doesn't fit neatly into subject boxes. Perhaps the most profound impact is on young learners themselves. There's a moment, often quiet, almost reverent, when a child realizes these tiles were touched by hands that lived centuries ago. The Mosaic stops being ancient history and becomes a bridge. One teacher described a student whispering, "They were just like us," while tracing a tile dog's paw print, likely added by a playful artisan. That connection, that sudden intimacy across millennia, is why this floor isn't just studied, it's felt. And in that feeling, curiosity takes root, not just about the past, but about all the stories still buried, waiting to be unearthed. The Mosaic's mysteries won't stay buried forever, because the tools we use to interrogate the past are evolving at breathtaking speed. Artificial intelligence is already peering into those ancient tiles with eyes sharper than any humans. Machine learning algorithms trained on thousands of known symbols from neighboring cultures can now detect subtle visual patterns we might miss. A team in Zurich recently fed high-resolution scans of the Mosaic into an AI system, and it flagged recurring motifs like that enigmatic three-pronged crown in fragments of pottery from a previously overlooked dig site 2 valleys away. Suddenly, what seemed like an isolated artwork might be part of a much larger visual language, waiting for algorithms to stitch it together. But AI is just the beginning. Ground-penetrating radar has uncovered anomalies near the original excavation site, rectangular shapes buried deeper than the Mosaic itself. Could these be the foundations of the building it once adorned? Or better yet, a library, its clay tablets preserving the very texts that could decode the imagery? Upcoming digs won't just focus on unearthing objects. They'll deploy chemical sniffers that analyze soil for traces of ink, pollen, or even decayed parchment, invisible clues to what once existed alongside the tiles. The real breakthroughs will come when disciplines collide. Imagine geneticists swabbing the mortar for ancient DNA, revealing not just who mixed it, but what microbes thrived in their environment. Materials scientists are developing nanoscale imaging that could pinpoint the exact quarry each stone came from, mapping trade routes with microscopic precision. Even astronomers are joining the fray, cross-referencing the Mosaic's celestial patterns with historical records of comets or supernova visible to the naked eye when these tiles were laid. What's thrilling is how much we still don't know we don't know. 20 years ago, no one could have predicted that a speck of resin on one tile would reveal the artist's last meal through isotopic analysis. Tomorrow's technologies might let us reconstruct the songs sung while the mortar dried, or the conversations between craftsmen as they placed each fragment. The mosaic isn't a static artifact, it's a conversation starter, and we're only beginning to hear its full voice. Every generation brings new questions, and with them, new ways of seeing. The children who visit this mosaic in VR headsets today might grow up to develop tools we can't yet conceive, peeling back layers of meaning hidden in the glint of a 1,000-year-old glaze. That's the beauty of great mysteries. They don't shrink as we solve them. They expand, revealing depths we never knew to look for. And this mosaic, with its silent symbols and stubborn secrets, promises to keep us chasing, learning, and marveling for centuries to come. Standing before this mosaic, you don't just see history, you feel it. The cool tiles underfoot, worn smooth by countless footsteps, carry the weight of centuries. It's an eerie sensation, realizing the hands that placed these fragments never imagined us strangers from a distant future, kneeling to study their work. Yet here we are, tracing the same curves they did, sharing the same human impulse to create meaning from chaos. There's a quiet magic in that connection, a thread stretching across time, fragile but unbroken. What's extraordinary is how the mosaic transcends its original purpose. The artists intended it for their community, a visual hymn to beliefs or events they held sacred. But time has transformed it into something universal. A child visiting today might fixate on the bold colors, a historian might dissect its symbols, a poet could lose themselves in its silent narrative. The artwork has become a mirror, reflecting back whatever the viewer brings to it. That's the paradox of great art. It's rooted in a specific moment, yet grows richer with each new gaze. The silence of this mosaic is its most profound feature. Unlike inscribed steels or scrolls, which speak in the rigid grammar of their time, these images breathe. They don't dictate meaning, they invite it. A raised hand could signal blessing or farewell. A cluster of stars might chart a season or a soul's journey. The ambiguity isn't a flaw, it's a gift, allowing the artwork to evolve as we do. Modern viewers might see environmental allegories in its fractured landscapes, or read the central figure's posture as resilience against oppression. The tiles don't correct us, they listen. There's humility in confronting something so old yet so alive. We're accustomed to measuring progress in millennia, assuming our era has unlocked all the answers. But this mosaic defies that arrogance. Its craftsmanship rivals modern techniques. Its storytelling sophistication challenges contemporary narratives. Standing before it, you realize how much we still don't know, not just about the past, but about the enduring human capacity to communicate across barriers. The artists didn't have satellites or AI, yet they built a bridge to the future with stones and patience. Perhaps that's the mosaic's final lesson. In a world obsessed with recording every moment, we've forgotten the power of leaving some things unsaid. These creators trusted images to carry what words might distort. They understood that true connection isn't about precision, it's about resonance. And somehow, against all odds, their faith was rewarded. Thousands of years later, their story still pulses beneath our feet, not because it was shouted, but because it was whispered in a language deeper than speech. The mosaic floor's greatest gift isn't the answers it gives. It's the questions it refuses to settle. Think about that for a moment. In a world obsessed with definitive histories and clear-cut narratives, this artwork stands as a radiant counterpoint, proving that some truths are too vast, too layered to be captured in words alone. Its very ambiguity is a masterclass in humility, reminding us that the past was never a single story, but a chorus of voices, some sung, some whispered, some pressed silently into stone. Consider how differently we'd view this mosaic if its meaning were spelled out in neat rows of text. The moment we could label it a harvest ritual, a royal succession, its magic would shrink to fit our modern categories. Instead, its open-ended symbolism invites us to lean in, to wonder, to collaborate across centuries. Every viewer becomes a co-creator, bringing their own experiences to the tiles. A farmer might see drought warnings in the cracked earth motifs. A dancer might recognize ceremonial steps in the figure's postures. The mosaic doesn't dictate, it converses. This is where its true power lies. Unlike fragile scrolls locked away in vaults, this floor was made to be touched, to be lived with. Its creators embedded their story in the most democratic medium imaginable, the ground beneath everyone's feet. There's something profoundly egalitarian about that. While elites hoarded written records, this artwork spoke to laborers, to children, to travelers who didn't share its language. Its visual poetry transcended literacy, offering knowledge as something to be walked through, not walled off. And isn't that what all great art aspires to outlast its time, not through brute endurance, but by making itself endlessly relevant? The mosaic's mystery isn't a flaw, it's the crack where the light gets in, allowing each generation to project its own hopes and fears onto those ancient tiles. Today, we might see climate allegories in its parched landscapes or read resilience into its unbroken borders. A century from now, new eyes will find fresh meanings we can't yet imagine. So yes, we may never fully decipher every symbol, every deliberate chip in the mortar, but in a way, that's the point. History isn't a puzzle to be solved, it's a relationship to be nurtured. This mosaic doesn't just connect us to the past, it connects us to every future viewer who will stand where we stand, tracing the same curves with their fingers, feeling that same spark of recognition across the ages. Which brings us to you. What do you see in these tiles? A lost creation myth, a coded rebellion, a love letter to the divine. The comments are your mosaic now, a place to lay down your own fragments of interpretation, adding to this unending conversation. And if you felt that thrill of discovery, that itch to peel back history's layers, hit subscribe, because this isn't the last secret waiting beneath our feet. It's just the first we've been lucky enough to uncover. The past has more stories to tell. Are you